Today, the Listening Tube welcomes a guest.
My guests today are co-authors of a book called Highjacked, Our Republic, Unless We Can Save It. They are speaking of the United States of America. Peter Calfee and Kevin Dolan met by chance, then spent years working together on a chronicle of the American government and where it stands today. They're a dynamic pair who are passionate about their work and the wisdom they hope to pass along. Peter and Kevin spoke with me from the relatively cool air of Vero Beach, Florida, about their book and some of the recent Supreme Court rulings.
An interview from the Listening Tube.
Both of you men seem to come from the business world. Peter, a little bit more than Kevin. So, Peter, what inspired you to delve into the subject of our Constitution and our Republic and its survival?
Well, I've always been a student of history, and indeed that was a major in college, and a love of most of virtually all of my life. I'm one of those unusual people that can't believe I'm sitting in the chair that Washington sat in and gave the speech for this and that. And history comes alive from my perspective, and so I've always had an interest in how things developed. I even took a course at one point, which was the philosophy of history, and that has stuck with me, even as I've used history in much of the business world to understand the movements of time, to understand the linearity of people's beliefs and structure and pursuit of what they are trying to do in their civilization and community. And as a result, my antennae were always and are always up. And so 4 years ago almost, Kevin and I met on a Armistice Day luncheon, just sat down next to each other, never having met each other, and started discussion about, hey, we're in a confused state in this country, and tried to understand the historical imperative of that confused state. Where did it come from? What started it? All of those questions were raised, all in a matter of an hour or two, sitting there until the waitstaff really wanted us gone because everybody else had left. But it sparked in us an interest in understanding, well, how did things develop to the point where, in our terms, they got hijacked? And what was the start of that? And that led to, a long story short, the hijacking of education, of religion, faith, values, the misunderstanding and miswriting and modification of history, if you will, and then the issue of politics being consumed in people's lives and consuming people's lives, and how economics is the stepchild of politics and can be manipulated to whatever end. And that evolved over a period of 2.5 years into our book.
Now, Kevin, you took an oath to defend the Constitution as an Air Force pilot, so your desire to continue to defend it doesn't surprise me. Was there a particular incident, though, that lit that flame for you?
Well, interesting question, but let me back up 1 second. I was in the Air Force, but Peter was in the Army. So we were at a Veterans Day luncheon. He talked about Armistice Day, but it was the same thing, Veterans Day luncheon. And the thing that lit me up, I've always been not as good a student as Peter. I think one of the things you learn is to always find people who are more intelligent than you to work with and that kind of stuff. So I did that in finding Peter. And so in terms of what inspired me, I think it goes back to a 2-semester course at my undergraduate school, Denison, and the evolution of the Western man process. And it was just amazing. It described how man went through all this process of these historical characters and how they generated change in society, and then what forces came into play in those change. And since I was an economics major at school, but I loved history, especially this course, it's to me it was a combination of what drove. Well, in my opinion, economics drove history because people are always looking to improve, always have more comfort, always have more this, that, or the other. And so you went from, say, feudalism in Western Europe to where they started to reach out with shipping and you had the Dutch East Indies, and you had the control of the seas also by the British. And so in their conflict, it was about the West Indies, the Pacific, and having trade from there. Well, there's conflicts involved in that process. And so what causes man to do that? Well, first off, you have to educate numerous people to be able to run a ship, right? So it develops these captain skills. And so education really starts to play a role, even though it's unrecognized. It's a shift of power, and people don't realize it because it's subtly occurring. Well, what are we experiencing? We exist in our lifetimes in a mere nanosecond of the history of the world, let alone of mankind. And in humankind's nature, what are the powers that drove us? And we tried to take universals, put it in this book in 6 chapters, only 109 pages, but there's another 100 pages or more in appendices. And those appendices apply to individual chapters. So if you read you read through 109 pages pretty easily. Hopefully, it brings a lot of stuff together, and then you can go into individual chapter and read the applicable appendice, and they are numbered by the chapter. Critical thinking is the most important thing that we develop as humankind so we can make good decisions. Well, how do you get there? Well, first, you have to be educated. You have to read and write. You have to be able to do some calculations in terms of math. And so when you develop those basic skills, you now can communicate, and you can do research, and you can prove different things mathematically, etc. Then you have the religion, faith, and values comes after education. First is critical thinking, then the basics for it, which are education, religion, faith, values. Where what are we based upon? If we look at the Declaration of Independence, and I can go back and quote that, but to give you a quick overview, I won't do it right now. The Declaration talks about inalienable rights, but it's founded on a value system. They were Christians that came over to the U.S. So people aren't talking about where we're at today in a democracy with regard to how important the value system is, but it is hugely important. And so after you do the education, religion, faith, values, then you get into history. Well, why? Well, do you want to repeat the same thing over and over again because you ignore history? No, you want to learn from history so you don't repeat mistakes. If we've evolved and done better, which I would say we have in many regards, but we're making big mistakes and some of them are repeated, then history plays a major role. And then with those in place, understanding critical thinking, those 3 pillars, additionally, you now can talk about political systems and economic systems. And when you begin to understand that, you then understand that the economic system serves at the convenience of the political system. So the political system is capable of ruining an economic system. And so we've got many issues, many quotes that go back millennia. We've got quotes throughout the book, and we've got a quote appendix, which I think is very valuable because it tends to take, this is the nature of humankind. It hasn't changed in over 2,000 years, 3,000 years. So we take those quotations and you apply them respectfully through the book.
Now, Peter, forgive me for not acknowledging or recognizing your military service. I was unaware. Thank you for Kevin for pointing that out. Now you've given us a very thorough description of the book and what's in it. Just looking at the logistics of it, what contributions to the book did each of you make? What was the game plan going in as far as which of you would fill which blank pages?
Well, actually, we both filled each page. It's the most interesting to us. One of the most interesting aspects of this almost 4-year process, in which we never had an argument. We went back and forth in thought and concept that made sense, that didn't make sense, why. We go and recalibrate, if you will, for what we thought was correct and come up with something even better. 1 + 1 = 3. And over the course of years, as we suggest, it is quite remarkable that we came across every page as a blank canvas for us to both kind of, as a tapestry, weave our threads through to have each page jump off the page and each chapter jump off the chapter and yet have a basis in fact, as we both described the chapter headings. What was causality? And this has really kept us together on the same point. We lost the ability to critically think and analyze what was going on in the world. And again, a long story short, if you really cannot understand what's happening to you today, if you cannot interpret and understand and diagnose and define what it is that's happening in political, economic, social strata, social culture, if you cannot do that, you're kind of at a loss, because you, in many instances, most we would argue, you've lost that continuum of purpose of why there is truth, what is good, what is not good.
Let me
Yeah, go ahead.
You're missing history. The historical patterns inform you, and if you don't reflect upon history, you're just going to have an opinion. Well, what is the basis of your opinion? Is it well informed? How well have you educated yourself on the topic? People, in my observation right now, are saying, "This is what I want." It's not going to change that rapidly. We're evolving. And so therefore, it's important when you say, how do we do things together to create this book the way we did? The term I would use is collaboration. And we had an incredible collaborative experience, become extremely good friends. And like Peter said, there were no arguments in 3 years of writing and then working on the book and podcasts and everything afterwards. We literally have not had any arguments. It's been an exchange of ideas, respecting the other one, liking the fact that they improved on our initial statement. We each were building on each other's statements, and we each improving it.
And Bob, I would merely add a postscript. If you don't have that, and that's why we used all three terms: religion, faith, and values. I don't care if you don't have an understanding of where you're from and why you do what you do and how you fit into the, as I say, the continuum of life in its historical aspects, among others. If you don't understand any of that, you're left with actually nothing. You might as well be Nietzsche. You might as well have a nihilistic view towards life. And if that's the case, and you can't understand what's even happening around you, you create your own reality. And that's what, to use the author's name that's been used before, Victor Davis Hanson talks about, you create your own identity politics. That becomes your mantra. That becomes your reason for getting up every morning. And that becomes so important to you that you force that on other people. And if they won't accept it, you get understandably, you get somewhat upset. So the identity politics that you see all around us for the last 20 years is a result of not understanding how we fit into historical imperative.
I think it's fascinating that you gentlemen worked on this book together and never had any disagreements. I
wouldn't say not disagreement.
Okay.
We would say, like, I don't like this, and the person was not offended by it.
No.
Is the big thing. We would criticize each other freely. We still do today.
Do you have
The
disagreements?
beauty of it is, and that's what we think is so important in society. We should all be able to criticize each other, but do it respectfully. When he and I criticize each other, we both realize that, we have gone through filled certain squares, done certain things that are not typical. And in the process, we know we're not dealing with an extreme lightweight. And so, well, there's only one way to deal with that. This guy's intelligent. I'm respectful. And I think and hope that Peter feels the same way.
Absolutely.
And so that was the magic in it. I mean, and I consider it magic. It doesn't make a lot of difference to us at this point. Our focus is on getting the information out. And if people understand the basics together, because children are not taught to critically think. They're not educated. They're indoctrinated today in our belief. Now, we think there are many good educational institutions, but they don't tend to be the public school system. Randy Weingarten, in my opinion, may have been one of the worst impacts on our society. It's everything that we've achieved. If you look at why the United States is so successful, is due to a specific term: competition. And so anything that does well, why do cars get better? Why does any product get better? Because there's competition. And if you don't remain competitive, your company's going to go out of business. Well, it's no different in some of the things that the government provides. Unfortunately, some things can't be competitive in nature. You could define that well. The educators want to make you think that education is that way so that there doesn't need to be any education and they'll just take care of it. But then they start taking control. And in taking control, they're not even telling the parents when a child wants to transition in their sexual identity. You need to be able to say that my parents, until I'm no longer a minor, need to be informed so that they can have an input into my development. When you take the parents out of that development, you're taking the most important resource that that child has in terms of care and concern for them. And if you say that the education is going to take over, well, look what happened in any country of communism. They take over, whether it's China under Mao or Russia under Stalin. They didn't create competitive products. And China today is stealing a lot of intellectual property. But they got smart people, so they can go and develop something once they've stolen a certain number of things. But the point of it is we've got a vibrant economy because people are free to pursue their self-interest. The economic system serves at the convenience of the political system. The political system can therefore ruin it. And therefore, we have to be very careful that we empower any institution like the educational system to a public process that doesn't encourage competition. We even have in a book, in an appendix, a method of creating competition in public schools. Because we're not trying to get rid of public schools. We just want competition introduced so that they're always motivated. And they should be motivated with charter schools and other ones too. But instead of that, they're trying to eliminate the competition. That's not the right way to handle anything.
See, Bob, our template was frankly Thomas Paine Common Sense, 1775. And it was at that point 47, 48, 49 pages, four little pamphlets put together that essentially said the same thing. The political system is impacting us in the colonies and ruining us. We need to first of all understand why this is the case and how to best improve upon that situation, i.e., separate at the end of the day.
Well,
and that's all that he did. He rose and ran up and down the 13 colonies, figuratively speaking, identifying this is a problem. Nobody's thinking critically. We have no rule of law. We can't speak our minds. We're taxed without representation. We are being suffocated, and we need to somehow, in a thoughtful, critical process, understand why, which was the 47 pages of common sense, and then throw off
a missing product today.
Throw off, yes.
Yes.
Throw off the burden of a monarchy, a political system that was killing the economic system of the colonies.
Send email to thelisteningtube@outlook.com.
So, Peter, then what are some examples of ways our republic is being hijacked?
Well, it's even if we had if we've had arguments, the classic case is how many times has it happened to how many people where you have a discussion and say, I really don't think that's what's happening here. I can't even talk to you, and then people get up from the table and leave. Now, if that process continues, which you see every day in our political and social environment, no one's talking to anybody. They're talking past each other. As a result, to answer your question, if we go to the lowest common denominator as opposed to accentuating the excellence that we could have with good critical thought, you're going to get the lowest common denominator product, which is ignorance, which is nihilistic understanding, which is my way or the highway, which is not at all what our country was about.
Well, the ultimate hijacking is the political system because it controls everything. Now, the first thing we should understand is that do we want a government that we serve, or does the government serve us? Whether you think of the Declaration of Independence or the Constitution, it is supposed to be that the government is serving us. When 75% or 80% of the population wants integrity in elections, such that they want the SAVE Act, where you have identification rules for voting, how can it not be passed when it's both 75 or 80% goes beyond the tribal side of the left or the right. And as a function of that, how can if we're in representative government, one of the easiest things to do would be to pass a process where 75 to 80% of the population want it. The citizens want it. Okay. And what country do non-citizens have a right to go in on vacation and vote? I'm saying vacation to make the point. We don't go over to France, take a vacation. Oh, by the way, they're voting this weekend. I think I'll go in and cast my vote. Or I'll schedule my vacation to go in and cast a vote in the French elections. No, people come over here legally and illegally, but no one that is not a citizen of this country who the government answers to should be voting. So if we create a system where we enable people due to sloppiness and terrible behavior by representatives, then we're saying it's just power grabbing. Well, that's where you get into the tribal process. That's where you get into indoctrination. That's where you get so the education system has been so hijacked that the public system under the NEA and Randy Weingarten's process for a long time while she headed up, and she still remains active in certain aspects. They are against any other forms of competition. But what is it? I want to have a child develop an ability to analyze something. I don't want to have a teacher tell this. I'm going to tell you what to think. This is the right answer. Spit back my answer. You'll get a good grade. That's not critically thinking. That's indoctrination. But under critical thinking, you say, here's all the information that happened historically. Here's or whatever all the information is on the topic we're talking about. Now tell me how you assemble that information to answer this question, which is the test question. And then the teacher should be saying, this is well developed. I may not agree with it, but it's the best development of putting together the information that child has access to and what we've covered in the classroom to date. And so that is a superior effort on this child relative to other people's answers. Well, some things are qualitative, some things are quantitative, but in that qualitative approach I just described, it's about the process of logically coming to conclusions. And the teachers should be teaching how to critically think, not indoctrinating.
I'll give you an apocryphal. It's actually a real circumstance. There was a college baseball coach at Cal Poly. His name was
Scolinos.
Yes, Scolinos, and it was in the late 1990s, 1980s. And he gave a speech, and he used it throughout his life, and it related to his marriage, to his work, to his interface with society, to everything he did. He said the plate at home plate for baseball is 17 and some inches. We don't adjust that. That's been since 1950. We don't adjust the size of the plate to match the caliber and quality of the pitcher. The pitcher's good, we should make it smaller. If the pitcher's bad, we should make it larger. That is the result of what happens in virtually any topic you could raise today, that we're adjusting the size of the plate instead of responding to what can be contributed by the pitcher, the catcher, the umpire, and the hitter. The plate doesn't change. We have lost those eternal facts, those eternal guideposts, if you will, of what we're trying to do.
The United States is a meritocracy. The reason we're successful is because we're competitive. We've taken a meritocracy with people with great ideas. Look what Elon Musk has done. He's taken rocket science and recaptured rocket ships to be reused. He has reduced the cost of transporting poundage up into space by 90%. And there's talking about the new Starship taking another 9%. He's almost going to reduce it by a factor of 2 digits. So what did that come from? It came from a guy with some knowledge, some ideas, some other things. He's well educated, and he has used his education better than any other entrepreneur out there, it appears. And does he do everything right? No. And people make mistakes. He's made some mistakes. But look at history. When we take a look at the statues that have been taken out because they were bad guys, didn't represent what we want as an optimal society, you say, what are you doing? You're eliminating information. These guys developed a name They did a statue for the person. Was it good or was it bad? Well, look in the history. He did some things good, some things bad. If you can identify the bad stuff, that's fine. That can be historical fact. That's knowledge. But for some reason, they got the statues of a person recognized typically, not always, for doing something that made a major contribution of a positive nature. But it may be in the wrong forces, the Confederate force. You could say he was a great general, but he was working for the wrong side for the purpose of maintaining slavery. Well, if you're maintaining slavery, that goes against the Declaration of Independence, inalienable rights. All men are created equal. So you weave all these things together and you find yourself going off in tangents, which I easily do, because it's all tied together. And when you begin to connect the dots and you go through 3 years of having, criticism back and forth, we hope that we put together a document that will live well beyond us. We're not youngsters anymore, but from our wisdom, if we have any, there's something to be learned here.
I'd like to ask you a little bit about some of the recent Supreme Court decisions. Specifically, clearly, the Supreme Court's reluctance to challenge birthright citizenship falls in line with the Constitution, but the 14th Amendment clearly also requires the person to be subject to the jurisdiction thereof and of the
That's the
state
quote
wherein
right
they
here.
reside.
The
Now,
Constitution.
was that part not considered? Because if the child is born here and then taken to another country, it's not under the jurisdiction thereof, nor does it reside in one of the states. Did the
Bob, you
Supreme
raise a
Court get
good
this
point.
wrong?
You raise a very good point that many people are really upset about that decision for, and I had it highlighted and pointed to quote what you just quoted, subject to the jurisdiction thereof. And the interesting thing is you could do an amendment, which is a huge problem, to supermajority in both
Sure.
Congress and the Senate, and then three-quarters of the
2/3.
states have to pass it. But there was an interesting creative solution. Give definition to the phrase. And so that could be passed as a law. And as a function of theoretically, it'll be tested in court like everything is. But that's why you have a tricameral body politic. And so things are to be tested in court. And justice is supposed to be blind. It's not perfectly, but it's supposed to be. So if you take that and you redefine with accuracy and detail what subject to the jurisdiction means, you could theoretically then have a new court case come in and say it's been defined. We think that therefore the Supreme Court needs to change the decision that it just made. And I think that's the most interesting, quicker solution that I think could hold up, but you can't tell until the courts have dealt with it.
So,
No,
Bob, I'm not so sure it wasn't correct in terms of putting it back to states, putting it back to Congress, because really defining what was written in 1775, 76, identifying the actual words, the true construction of the document, it needs to, in our collective judgment, it needs to stand the test of time. As a result, if there are nuances of how long can we go on about this? How many thousands and hundreds of thousands of people are signing up for trips to the US just to have a baby, to overwhelm us with those children when they're brought back already as citizens to proceed to vote and modify and change and alter our entire construction of what is the result of the Declaration of Independence and our Constitution and so forth. I tend to like the fact that the states and Congress can grapple with that issue, because I agree with the what may be inferred by your question. This is like the Titanic sinking, and you've got the lifeboats filled, and we have 20 more people we can bring into the lifeboat, and you all die, you all sink. And so, are you destroying? Are you throwing out the baby with the bathwater and destroying the entire concept of a bath? Or are you beginning to grapple with how many people can we honestly put in a lifeboat, using the Titanic metaphor, or how many people can we let in who absolutely have no understanding or faith, no critical thought about what we are, how we're founded, and what we are attempting to do in the history of humankind?
And what Peter's referring to is culture. And when we've got someone that comes in on birth rate in vacations where they birthright and they come in on a vacation and they come back and neither parent is a citizen, then should the child be given citizenship? Well, the Supreme Court said it's been done for a long time, so we are not changing it. Okay. And they said that the wording of the phrase you and I both used, quotes, was not adequate to distinguish and change what is currently being done. Now, the purpose of the courts is not to change law, it is to interpret the law. And so, unfortunately, there's many active judges that go into creating law. And that, to me, is the loose constructionist versus strict constructionist. If it's going to be a law, Congress and Senate have to pass it. The Supreme Court just recently process gave the president power over independent agencies as an executive authority. So they do answer to somebody where they hadn't in the past, but they limited how much they could do with regard to the Federal Reserve.
Yes.
So while the lady on the Federal Reserve is looked at for illegal paperwork on a mortgage application, they said you couldn't remove her until she's proven guilty. Well, if you're innocent until proven guilty, does that not make sense? You're saying I don't like it because she's been indicted for this. Well, that would say you don't like it because you think she's guilty now. She's not been proven guilty. So one of the good things about our country is presuming innocence until proven guilty. The court's application is not to reinforce one tribe or the other. The court's purpose is to interpret law as it exists and say, is it the proper interpretation or not? If it hasn't been interpreted, then someone's got to interpret it and say what it means. Okay, this is what it means.
If you want to learn more about Peter Calfee and Kevin Dolan and their book, Highjacked, Our Republic Unless We Can Save It, you can at hijackedourrepublic.com. Thanks to Peter and Kevin for spending some time with you and me in the Listening Tube. Be sure to follow the Listening Tube at thelisteningtube.com. There you'll find other features like This Week in History and Not the Headlines. Thank you for putting your ear to the Listening Tube. I'm your host, Bob Woodley, for Thou Ad Infinitum.